Welcome, everyone. We will give it another 30 seconds and then we will start. All right. Once again, welcome everyone. Good morning, noon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I'm Dr. Bushra Anjum, and in my day job, I'm the Director of Data Science at Doximity. As a volunteer, I'm the Standing Committee's Chair for ACM Women, and also the host for this ACM-W Celebrating Technology Leaders series. This series is designed to demystify careers in tech, especially for women. We discuss career options, career opportunities, and career challenges. In each episode, we invite women leaders who have been successfully architecting their careers in computing, and we celebrate their stories and learn from their experiences. Today, we are focusing on the DevOps career path. And DevOps engineering is a relatively new career, and there are several questions worth exploring. And for that, we have put together a fantastic panel for you. Before talking to our panelists, a few logistical reminders. I will be facilitating the discussion for the first 45 minutes. Some of these questions are taken from those submitted by you at the time of registration. The final 15 minutes will be for Q&A for you. You can put forth your questions by typing them into the Q&A window and submitting them. And feel free to write in and send your questions throughout the discussion. Thank you for spending the next hour with us here. We will make every effort to make it worth your while. So today we have with us Kiara Henderson, a DevOps engineer. We have Dottie Nordberg, a senior DevOps engineer, and we have Aisha Noor, a DevOps manager. Our fourth panelist, Jessica, unfortunately is not able to join us, but that means more time to explore more questions with these three panelists. So let's hear about them from them. So the panelists, welcome, and thank you for volunteering your time with us. Please tell us something about your educational background, career journey, and how you got to your current role. We can start with Kiara.
Okay, well, hi everyone. So I kind of got into this from a weird path. I actually wanted to be a music producer, but ended up going to school for engineering. In that time, I really just focused on mobile security research. So I'm actually an Android developer. That's my entire background, security within that realm. And somehow over the past, I've been in DevOps for 2 years now. I made a transition to do more automation. When I actually have a job, I am still a freelancer, but when I was freelancing, automation was just such a big thing, like managing backends, plus the mobile app was just a lot. And so I finally decided, like, let me give this a try. This is really fun. And it really worked out for me as far as like health and just like time and learning.
Thank you. The music producer aspect is just amazing about your journey. That really underlines the message that tech careers are really for everyone, no matter what background you are from. Aisha?
Hello. So I basically did my bachelor's in computer engineering around 13 years ago. I started off as a QA engineer, and for the first 5 years of my career, I was working as an automated QA engineer with some work in infrastructure management. And eventually that part really caught my eye. I got a bit bored of QA, so I started to shift into infrastructure management and developing CI/CD pipelines for the small project that I was working on. I then got an opportunity to work with a Silicon Valley startup, which has its engineering backend in Lahore. And that's when I made the complete switch to DevOps, and that has had a tremendous learning curve for me. So everything that I have learned in DevOps is at the startup, and I have seen growth from zero to where we are today, which is working with big enterprise customers in the US. And the project that I'm currently working on is also very cloud-centric. So it has a very good option for me to explore AWS cloud specifically in my experience. So that's how I got into DevOps, and I've been working as a DevOps engineer for around 6 to 7 years now.
That's great to hear. And one of the most popular questions that we got at the time of registration was how to make the switch from a QA career to a DevOps career. So we will certainly explore that more with you. Dadi?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dottie Nordberg. Happy to be here today. And I have a little bit of a non-traditional background in that I do not have a computer science degree. I actually have a bachelor's degree in math. And at the time, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. This is many, many years ago. And so I started working actually as an administrative assistant, which is a good job. I wanted to do something else, wanted to try and do something more on the science end. And so I worked to get some Microsoft certifications. And that allowed me to actually get 2 job offers working as a Microsoft systems administrator to start. And the interesting thing with that is the previous company that I was working for, or the current company at the time I was working for, didn't have any openings in their IT department. So that's why I went and interviewed at these other 2 places. So when I got the offers, I chose one, went to hand in my 2-week notice to my manager, and she said, thank you very much. And then about an hour later, the director of IT for that current company came over to me and said, hey, can I talk to you? And I had talked to him previously, and he had told me there weren't any roles. So I was thinking he was just going to congratulate me on my new role at this other company. What was I doing? Things like that. Well, he actually said, hey, we'd like to offer you a job here in the IT department. And I was like, oh, I thought there weren't any. And he's like, yeah, but don't worry about that. And so it was actually a better offer. So I wound up staying there and learning a whole bunch of stuff. It was a great job. And then from there, that was while I was living on the East Coast. I actually grew up in New York and lived in Georgia for a while. And then I moved out to California, to Silicon Valley, about a dozen years ago. Oops, sorry. And living here, it's kind of interesting. You see as a tech person, you see all the buildings with all the Salesforce, LinkedIn, Meta, Facebook, and you're like, wow, this is crazy. So wound up working as a contractor at one of the big companies who had just purchased or acquired a little startup that was building their own satellites and launching them. They had 2 launched into suborbit around the Earth. And that was just a dream job for me because I've always wanted to be an astronaut. So I got to do that. And that was a great experience, learning more and more as I went along, learned Linux operating system, different CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment tools and platforms along the way, just constantly learning new things. And now learning the Terraform so that I can work on infrastructure as code, getting in my coding side of things. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I'm still excited and happy to go to work.
That's great to hear. And I really love how in your story, continuous learning and improving is kind of part and parcel of that. And there is another question that our audience is really interested in knowing is that being in the tech field, how do you stay relevant and current? So I'll certainly explore that with you. Before getting into specific discussions, I would like to get your perspective on the DevOps engineer job title as a whole. So as I was saying in my intro, it's a relatively new career path or title, but we have seen positions or opportunities like that in the same domain, like you were mentioning system administration, maybe IT support, maybe site reliability engineering. So considering all these existing positions and of course, DevOps engineering, how would you define the core mandate of being a DevOps engineer, which is separate from all these other titles in that space? Dottie, let's start. Oh, sorry, Kara, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think I have like the newest career out of the three of us here. I can say from my perspective, I work in the space industry. So it's really just been me being the system admin and automation person. So a lot of Terraform goes into my day-to-day. Currently learning Ansible, but I had a heavy background in AWS beforehand. So a lot of times in my previous job, especially, I was at the table with like, hey, we want to build this project. Here's the stack we're looking at using. How does that affect our resources given our budget? And those are things that like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever cried at an AWS build, but like I've done that before. So it was very helpful having that experience and being in those meetings. But like I was throwing up VMs, throw up servers, using Docker and Kubernetes and things like that. So I think it's more of a system admin job with like a splash of automation. But like, that's just from my point of view. I have no clue what it looks like for anyone else outside of like governments and stuff like that.
Go ahead, Dottie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's DevOps is development and operations. So yeah, I totally agree with what Kira was saying. And we manage, we maintain, we monitor, and we scale the systems that the engineering teams use to develop their code. So that's kind of the operation side. And then wherever we can, we automate tasks, like you were saying as well. And that's kind of the development side of things. So we are, there's kind of a joke saying that DevOps and operations people are kind of lazy, in that if there's something that is a repeatable task or something that has to be done constantly, you automate it so that you never have to do it again, and then you can work on something fun. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
Aisha, would you like to add anything to that based on your experience?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what everyone else has said. In addition to that, I would say it's a job where you have to have the mindset that you are here to fasten things up, to make them more efficient, to help everyone run their stuff easy in a more cohesive way, in a more fail-safe way, and much more faster than they would do. And in my experience, like I'm working in a startup, so things are very chaotic a lot of the time, and things are they're very ad hoc, the requirements that come in. And sometimes when I joined in the beginning, a lot of the setup had already been done by the developers, and it was complete chaos. So I also think that part of automation and everything, I think maintenance is also like a big part of that, and cleanup is also a big part of that. Adhering to best practices, making sure that you are kind of like speaking your truth, and when faced with having to do very fast builds, or when you're shipping out the increments of the product very repeatedly and on a very frequent basis, you still have to have the same voice of knowing what's the right way to do something, even if it's it takes time or it takes some more effort. And I think DevOps is very fundamental to continue to bring that effort to the table, instead of just doing what works in the moment.
That's fantastic. And I really love about this panel is that you cover such a diverse experience range. You are in a startup. Kiara is currently working in government. Dottie had this entire career progression starting from sysadmin. So a question for all three of you, whoever might want to take that. In your opinion, is there a particular skill set, technical or people-oriented, which is required to be successful in this career?
Well, if I had to say, I would say the definitely a coding language of some kind, those kinds of skills. Familiarity with like continuous integration and continuous deployment systems helps. Operating system knowledge helps as well. Nowadays, it's virtualization is a big one. So AWS, Kubernetes, VMs, Docker, that kind of stuff. Server systems versus client systems, those kinds of skills are helpful. And then along the lines of like non-technical skills, I think I would say curiosity and problem solving are really good skills to have. If you like to solve puzzles in your off time, or if you're just like we were talking about earlier, learning mindset type of person, I think you would do well in a DevOps career.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm gonna say it from more of a developer perspective. I would just learn the cloud. Like I'd be really good at my stack, but being able to fully deploy to the cloud. So me being an Android, I still can do backend development. I get excited coding. It's my hobby. So like Go and Rust are things that I've tried. But I think if you can tie in your like, oh, I can code up this stack, I can get this backend working, but then you can put it all in the cloud. You can all put in the Kubernetes cluster. Those things are really big. I'm also a documentation snob. So that really helps me because from my background, I was talking to like design teams, backend teams, and like in startups, you know, it's crazy. So there's nobody's documentation. So I would force everyone to approve my documents beforehand, and then we'd go on to the next step. And that kind of helped me be known even in like the startup that I was working in last of like, okay, if you talk to Kiara, like you're gonna have some documentation coming out of it at the end of it. And then she's probably gonna automate it for the mobile devs. So we don't have to have another conversation. So, I mean, it works. It's probably not everyone's like best path, but that's what worked for me.
I love your focus on documentation. Aisha,
Yeah.
yes, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in addition to all of that, like I agree with what everyone said that, but I would also like to add that, so a skill set, even working with people like DevOps, a lot of the times in my experience has, like I said, that you have to have your truth and you have to know what's the best way to do this. You have to have very good people skills to be able to have everyone on board with what you're trying to propose. And I completely agree with Kiara, the documentation in that respect really helps a lot. And I think generally, as I might be wrong and it might be a very gender specific, but I think women are so much more organized at that kind of stuff. They're so much more organized and keeping things where they are. So I think this career path also like it has a lot of breadth, right? So you have to have knowledge of a lot of other things. You might not be going very deep into a technical stack, but you have to know how basic network works. You have to know OS. You have to know a lot of stuff in a wide range. So I think we juggle that really well because we are already so used to multitasking and keeping a lot of things under control. So I think that also it became very apparent to me that it was much more suited to how we operate. To me as a person, like I really enjoy keeping a lot of those things, on my plate.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, people skills are important in any career. But as I was talking to the panelists and doing some research, it seems like having good people skills is even more important in this DevOps related career. And just building on something what Aisha said, Dottie, it seems like your position might require you to maintain a fine balance between operations guidelines and best practices and the software developers' preferences who might want things like yesterday. So how do you approach situations where different teams may have conflicting asks or preferences?
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, there's what they call the software development lifecycle, where you one of the first stages, I believe, is called planning, but that's like months out before the actual product is actually shipped. So you can't always predict what you're going to need at what time. So usually kind of the DevOps thing is the resources that are needed are kind of last minute on the developer side of things. which makes sense because they're working on the code. So sometimes we will get requests for, 100 new systems, that we needed yesterday, like you were saying. And that's just most times not possible. There is a misconception that teams like operations teams or DevOps teams, systems administrator teams have like servers just sitting in the back waiting to be used, just, unused stuff waiting there. And teams are like, can't you just put them up? Can't you just plug them in? I'm like, no, we don't have anything. Just that would be awesome. We would love that, but it's not there. And so, and that is not an exaggeration. Yeah, when those just kind of things come up, the general plan is to put the fire out, say, okay, you said you needed 100, we can get you maybe 10. Will that get you unstuck? And then with the 10, after that, you're like, okay, next week we'll see if we can get you another 10. And so then you go through and see if there's anything that can be reused or repurposed or anything like that. The issue is if you do actually need 100 new systems, some hardware or something like that, it can take 3 or 4 months from the time that it is ordered until it is delivered and racked and stacked. And that's pushing it. That's if you're going really quickly on it. So the hope is that engineering teams, development teams will bring DevOps in as early in that planning phase and say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Do we have the resources to do that? Do we have the infrastructure in place that we can just roll this out in a month or two? I've been in a couple of teams, a couple of meetings where that's actually happened, and they brought us in early. They brought me in at the beginning stages, and I was like, oh yeah, we have that. We can make room for that. No problem. And everybody was so much more happy with the infrastructure teams being able to do what we needed to do right away. We were happy, they were happy, and it was great. I was really hoping that teams would kind of talk about it and it would catch on with the other engineering teams. So maybe it's a management issue, and managers maybe need to push a little bit more to get the DevOps side of things into the planning stages of the software development.
Totally. That kind of awareness and training would certainly help everyone involved. Kiara, so anything in particular you find interesting about the DevOps field, or any story of achievement or contribution you want to share?
Yeah, so it's gonna sound bad, but I really enjoy the fact that I can tell people no. So, similar to Dottie, like my previous job, I managed 5 teams, which was the entire organization by myself. And so the cool part about that is like getting people to understand what DevOps engineers are there for. Over my time there, like the change from the time I started, from the time I left, was like crazy. At first, it was like they were just saying no, like, oh, we don't want to do that because we have X, Y, and Z deadlines. And because of my security background, because of my experience in the cloud, I got to be like, okay, so like no, because compliance. And, it kind of makes people mad, but being able to make them slow down and think. So over time, it got to the point where we were talking like, hey, we have this deadline coming up. So what do you think? What do you see from the company coming down the pipeline compliance-wise? How can we better position ourselves to move forward? And like that whole thing was just crazy to me because I just remember my first couple of months, I was just like, man, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna just go back and be an Android developer because like this is crazier than development. And like Android is crazy. You don't get holidays. Holidays is your busy season, But when you work in the government, holidays are also end of year compliance. So by October, it's like, okay, so technically everything needs to be locked down. These databases need to go away if you're not using them. You need to resize all of your EC2 instances. And it was just like, everyone was just like, we're not doing that. By the time I left, it was like, okay, so when is our deadline? Do you have space for this? Can we maybe put this here so we don't have to rush it towards the end? And that just felt really good because I just would have never seen that happen as a developer, nor did I think I have that much like power and influence over it.
That's fantastic to hear. I especially like the compliance part of it, and that how the cycles in terms of number of months change from job to job. Aisha, same question for you. Any interesting story you may want to share with us as within your career as a DevOps engineer or a manager?
I have one from like very early on when I was an AWS newbie as well. So like I said, when I joined my startup, a lot of the production infrastructure had already been set up by the developers. And because they did not go very deep into infrastructure, what they did was that they created, so there are Lambdas, right, which are basically your on-demand compute, so serverless. And then what they had done was that they had created, for one Lambda, if they wanted to create it in 3 different environments, they had 3 different Lambdas going. So there was like a very long list of hundreds of Lambdas that I was supposed to be managing and looking at. And then I remember that there was some requirement for us to rename them so that they're more legible, because obviously nobody followed naming conventions. So I remember looking at that mess, and I remember there is no way I'm spending the next 4 weeks going into these and renaming them and restructuring them. So that's where the automation mindset comes in, or where you want to learn and see. And so I made a whole pipeline that would create versions within the Lambdas for your environments. And so I shrunk down that list of 400 Lambdas to like 100 Lambdas or something. So I think that was one of the very first opportunities that I had for automation and for streamlining things and making them neater and more manageable that I remember very fondly. Of course, there's been other stuff that I've done since then. For like, when you terraform your entire infrastructure from scratch, and you see everything spin up very beautifully at one command, and you see your entire infrastructure laid out in a different environment. It's a very beautiful feeling as well. But overall, I think the way that you see tasks of weeks getting reduced to hours is, I think, a very nice feeling that I think I chase personally in my career.
That must be very gratifying. And it's interesting to hear stories like this, because something as simple as naming convention or versioning convention can increase your work fourfolds or reduce it. Thank you for sharing that. And Aisha, you said something earlier that got me thinking when you were talking about multitasking. And it's a question for all my panelists. Is DevOps a promising career for women? And I asked that within the umbrella of tech careers in general. So what would you say are maybe unique challenges and opportunities for women who might want to go to this career as opposed to, say, a software development position? We can start with you, Aisha.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I cannot speak for someone who's doing development versus DevOps. I think Kiara would be more suited to speaking to that. I can speak to, however, the switch that I made, which was from QA to DevOps. I personally felt that DevOps, because it fueled learning, and because there was something new to handle each day, which was something that I had started lacking in my career of QA after like 5 or 6 years, because eventually QA becomes a bit repetitive in that, if you're working on web applications, there's only a certain kind of workflow that you're going to be following. So DevOps broke that monotony for me. And once that was done, I think I found it like very, very suited, like I mentioned before, that the multitasking aspect of it, the breadth of it as compared to the depth was very gratifying for me, and it suited me quite well. And I think that's something that a lot of women can relate to as well, because we're juggling everything all the time. So this doesn't really brush us up that much. It's not really a very big problem. And then so overall, like, I think multitasking and knowing more things than your average developer would know is something that I really think is suited for women. And I absolutely, in my community, I absolutely vouch for this kind of a switch whenever somebody asks, because in the Pakistan tech scene, I think a lot of women are pegged into being only, they're only directed towards being QA. Because that's somehow a roof that is set on their technical talent, which I'm very intent on breaking, because you can go for these more challenging careers. You can go for for things that you would eventually figure out are more suited to your natural temperament as women. So yeah.
Well, more power to you to break even more stereotypes. Dottie, the same question, this career specifically for women, what are the opportunities or challenges in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it is a good opportunity, I would say, if you have that mindset, if you like to learn, if you like science, if you like tech, I'd say go for it. One of the issues that I find, or it's getting better, is that when I first started, I was usually the only woman on the team, and that can be intimidating if you're the only, whatever your situation is, whether it, being a woman in particular, we're talking about today, but it could be any other group, race, or a nationality, or LGBTQ, whatever. If you're the only one of those type of people on your team, it can be a little intimidating. So the good news is that it's getting better. At one point, I was in a team of 20 people, and I was the only woman. Now, so that's like 5% female. Now I'm on a team of 8 people, and there's 2 women, so that's 25%. So we're getting there. It's taking a long time. We have a long way to go. Companies are investing in things like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which is great. There are even employee resource groups. Some companies have little, they're like clubs for folks who have different identities. There's one at my company now. It's for women in engineering. It's called Nerdy Girl, but anybody can join. So allies are more than welcome. And then also things like maternity leave and spousal leave are also very beneficial to women and their families, because we do have things outside of work that we do, and that's important too. So I think it is a promising career for women, and I think it's getting better and better. I've seen it just in my career, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of years too.
For sure, for sure. Progress is slow, but it's there, and we'll celebrate every little step as we go along the way. Building up on that, Dottie, my apologies. Let me go to Kiara first with this question about career for women, and then I'll come back to you.
So I think it's a good career. I'm really a researcher. I guess I did mobile security research, computer engineering degree, tried grad school, dropped out. I love research. I love learning. So I think this was like a really cool fit for me, because not only do I get to be a developer, I get to talk security. I get to be in meetings that I probably shouldn't be in because of my background. And I find that fun. I think the biggest challenge for me has been being the only Black woman on my team or my previous company in the entire org, that section of the org. People like to challenge you a lot more, but I mean, my parents raised me to challenge folks back. So, as long as documentation exists, as long as you're not afraid to really prove why you're right, I think is an important thing. Like a lot of times people just say whatever and keep it moving. And they expect you to be okay with that as a woman. But if you're sit down and basically lay your credentials out on the table is kind of how it feels. I think it makes it a lot easier for people to not just see you as for me, it was like, oh, you're just a developer who just happened to be in this. And it's you're not completely wrong, but I also just spun up your account. So what are we talking about here? So yeah, I think it's fun for me. I have RA and stuff in my hands. So it really allows me to code after work a lot more. I get to read a lot more things, and then I get to try a lot more. I don't know much about Kubernetes. I get to do Kubernetes after work. And, if I screw up a system, no one kind of cares because it's on dev. But if you do that as a developer, the whole app crashes. So it's just really fun for me as far as learning and things that you can niche down and focus on.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you have the researcher's mindset. Do you see graduate school in your future sometime?
Yeah, I'm hoping to go back next year. don't really know what I'm going for. Maybe math, maybe network security. But I think it'll be pretty important as AI and things kind of grow, just to have that under my belt.
Totally, totally. And let me evolve this question a little. So from our focus to gender, let's move our focus to career stage. So a question for all my panelists. Do we think it's DevOps engineering is a good career for a fresh graduate? Because I'm hearing words like breadth of experience, multitasking, and a number of skills in terms of hardware and software are being mentioned. So can a fresh graduate go in and be successful in this field? Or do they need other types of hands-on experiences before they can consider a career in this particular field? Kara, let's start with you.
So, a little controversial. I don't think this should be a first job. And I say that because, like, the amount of things I just kind of got thrown into, I think it's very hard to manage and see the big picture if you don't have like at least 2 to 3 years experience in one of the other core things. Like if you haven't been a system admin, you haven't been a dev, you haven't been on the operations side, it's hard to see how the things connect. Also, when I was moving over like 2-ish years ago, there's no junior DevOps positions. And like I kind of get it, but I don't. I don't know what we do to change that, but it's very hard to, hey, let's have a junior. Oh, what is our junior supposed to do? Oh, you have to throw up these 3 load balancers using Terraform by the end of the week. That's really overwhelming, right? But if you already like, okay, I understand a little bit of Terraform. I know how to like Google this the correct way to figure out what I'm doing. I know a little bit of AWS. It's a lot easier to connect the pieces and you won't feel like beat up within the first 3 to 6 months.
And thank you for your honest opinion. That's exactly why we are having these conversations, so that people have a breadth of views and opinions to go with. Dottie, what will be your take on this?
Yeah, I agree. It could be, though. I'm going to take the opposite approach. I think it could be, depending on the organization. We have some people, like an entry level person on our DevOps team right now. And they started out from the software side. They have a computer science degree, but they had that growth mindset. They were super enthusiastic during the interview process. I interviewed them and they were really passionate about what they did and really interested. And they had that, they had enough that the other people on the team could help them out. They had other skills that we needed. So I think it could be a first career if it's something that you're excited to do. I think I've been on many interview panels, and the thing that is pretty important, more important than I realized now, but now that I'm on the other side, I see it, that your passion for what you do is just as important as like your skills. And in some cases, when you're starting out, it's more important because it could be that they need to see that you are someone that is interested in learning. And we keep saying that over and over, but it is true. There's new tech that comes out every week that we are expected to try, or maybe some developers is trying it out, and now all of a sudden DevOps team, here you go, you got to learn this now, and that has happened. So there's so many variables, there's so much depth of knowledge that even the senior folks, there's people on my team that have been doing it just as long as I have, and they're learning Terraform along with me. But there are other people on the team that's what they do. They have the Terraform knowledge. So there's a balance. And I will say that if you were to try, if you were to find a job that you were really interested in, and it had some of these skills that maybe you weren't so sure about, and you got the job offer, I say go for it. I mean, they're not going to hire you if they didn't think you could do the work. And you're probably going to be interviewed by 6, 7, maybe even 8 senior level people, and that know what they're talking about, that know what the job entails. So yeah, so go for it, I say.
Yeah. Aisha, same question.
Yeah, I will agree in part with both the panelists here. Uh, I would say that it is a grueling job. It's not an easy job. And sometimes that, scares fresh grads. I've seen that happening because they don't expect this level of, so that would be, compensated by what Dottie said, that you have to have passion for learning and you will have a higher learning curve in the beginning. You will have to contribute more. You will have to be more dedicated to your job. And the reason why I agree with Kiara is that, for example, like from my experience, when I switched over, DevOps was still an evolving career. So I was already into my career before I had the opportunity to switch. And that actually helped me ease into this career as opposed to being thrown into the midst of it and having to drown or swim. So that was helpful to me. And right now, I think things are changing. That in the sense that I've hired a junior DevOps who has had DevOps as his first job, and I see myself helping him learn things that I learned over years that he is now learning, for example, over months. Because he has the dedication to learn, so it's not as challenging. So both things can work. I think that's why I really like DevOps as a career option for women, is that whatever, like Kara mentioned, that whatever background you're coming from, you can very easily ease into it. But irrespective of that, even if you're starting off as a fresh grad, you have to be very committed to your job, and you have to know that there is going to be a learning curve, but it's going to be very well worth it, both in terms of job satisfaction and in terms of your career progress.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really liked how you shared that it helped you, that it was a transition from QA to your current job, but also there are now opportunities available for fresh graduates as well. Aisha, a follow-up question for you. So we were talking about fresh graduates. Let's move one level up. Let's say second job. So what would you say, which type of experience would help the person to ease into a DevOps career? There could be a system admin experience, there could be a developer experience, there could be a QA experience. Do you think one of these experience or one of these paths would lead to an easier time or a shorter ramp up?
Definitely, I think I would have adapted easier if I had some sysadmin experience under my belt before I switched into this, because that was a bigger learning curve for me. I also think, I think it's a general statement, but any experience that you have before switching into DevOps is not going to be wasted. It is going to come into play. Even today, I see my QA experience being very relevant because I have that eye for detail. I know how to spot things that can potentially go wrong, and it has helped me tremendously. Even today, if there is, because I have had experience with security testing, for example, I can weigh in on security issues that come up, and I know how to resolve them now that I'm on the other side onto ops. So anything that you're coming from, it is going to help you because every part of the job is going to hone some kind of skill for you. So it's not like it's going to be tougher coming from one or the other, but definitely because DevOps requires a breadth of experience, I think having that kind of knowledge of networking, OS would have been it would have made my learning curve easier, but it's not that coming from QA was any kind of disadvantage. So yeah, I mean, it's doable.
Fantastic. Kiara, same question for you. Do you think there are any types of jobs or prior experiences that naturally lend themselves towards having a transition in DevOps?
So for me, I think the system admin piece was the biggest deal. It's something you don't really have to do as a developer, but I had learned on my own because I was interested in people not using a mouse when they work. And then probably QA. Aisha, please don't be mad, but I have never written a test as a mobile developer. It's like a joke, in developer world, especially a mobile. The testing is through QA. We don't really write tests. So learning that, I wish I had done a lot more in college to focus on it when I actually cared and had good projects for it. Because yeah, a lot of times you're looking at pipeline tests and what broke, why did it break? And sure, I can read error messages, but maybe I would understand a lot more of the thought process if I wrote better tests.
Great. Dottie?
Yeah, so for me, I'm coming from the other side. I was the sysadmin side and coming in, learning the coding side. So for me, it seemed like a pretty easy fit. I think I mentioned when I first started out, this was many, many years ago, and DevOps did not exist. So being a sysadmin, a lot of the older senior folks that I work with now are like me. They were sysadmins. Maybe they had a degree in computer science, maybe not. And they also have stuff that they do at home. They have their home systems set up, their home networks. They do stuff at home. And so if you're that kind of person and you want to do stuff at home, like I think the other panels were saying they do stuff at home too, then maybe, yeah, that would be helpful to you to get that experience that you can add to your previous experience and bring that to the new job.
Great answers. And for my audience, a couple of the last questions were actually inspired by some of the questions that you are sending right now in the Q&A widget. So please, if you have any other questions as well, please type them out in the Q&A window there, and I'll try to incorporate as many as possible. And the rest I'll share with my panelists, and you will get your responses. Another question that came in from our one of our attendees right now is that, is there any place specific that people, fresh graduates or people who are looking for their first job should look towards to find maybe entry-level DevOps positions?
I found my first DevOps job on Reddit. I know that is unusual, but there's a r/DevOps jobs and r/DevOps. And so I'm like also a space nerd. I work in the space industry through government. So at that time they were talking, it was a satellite company, and they were like, hey, we got this open house. Like, we need people to show up. We're trying to hire folks. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can go back to working in space. I can get out of a mobile struggle. So I just went to that, and like I failed my first interview because they were looking for someone more senior, but they were like, hey, this other org needs a person. You seem like you'd be a great fit. You'd probably catch up with our systems pretty quick. Go interview with them. So look in unusual places. I've actually never got a job off of LinkedIn, but like ZipRecruiter, Reddit, Twitter sometimes. I just lean really heavy on the social stuff because I didn't really know how to get into DevOps. So I was just asking anybody I could on like, what book should I read? What should I be studying? Like, I didn't really see any jobs at the time when I was looking for this. So I was just throwing questions everywhere.
Great advice. Dottie, Aisha, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a new position, what I would do is I would do a job search, any old job search, LinkedIn or Indeed.com, one of those places. Find jobs that you're interested in, maybe not apply to them, but just find like jobs that look interesting to you. And then find maybe, I don't know, a dozen of them or so, and then look through them all and figure out which skills that they have on those jobs. And if you have those skills, maybe compile a list. This is my geek side showing, I would probably compile a list and find those top skills that all those jobs that you're interested in are looking for, and see if you have those skills. And then if you do, great, highlight them on your LinkedIn profile or wherever you're looking for jobs. I have actually gotten jobs through LinkedIn. Recruiters have found me and gotten jobs that way, so that still works for folks. And then if you don't have those skills, figure out a way to try and get them, maybe through online courses or certifications. A lot of places offer like free learning. I'm sounding like a LinkedIn employee here, but there is LinkedIn Learning, and there's AWS certifications as well. Coursera, there's Udemy.com, the Khan Academy. A lot of it is low cost or even free. So those are great resources. Definitely use those. And then network, like Kira was saying. She kind of networked and found the job. That's also great.
Aisha, anything you would like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so like from a transitioning perspective, I think it's very important, even if you're working at a place in one capacity, I would always advocate for keeping an eye on what everyone else is doing as well, with respect to their job function, because that really helps you get an idea of how things function overall. And then it makes it easier to switch. Like before, for example, in my case, before I switched from QA to DevOps completely, there was a time at which I was doing both. I was managing CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure in addition to doing QA. So if you want to switch in that way, I think it's always very important to network within your team, shadow someone senior that who's doing something that you are interested in switching into. That's always a very good learning experience, because you get some insight into actual practical experience as opposed to theoretical knowledge, which Dorothy has shared a lot of resources that you can get to. So I think that also really helps. Like, look around in your organization at people who are doing the work that you eventually want to do and just shadow them.
Love that advice. Networking, shadowing, self-learning via online courses. Would any of you say that certain certifications could help improve your profile or make you a more ideal candidate?
So speaking government work, it's like a requirement to have a security plus a lot of times. So if you want to be in that realm of red tape like me, you definitely need security plus. Even if you don't have it, it usually is a requirement within 3 to 6 months. I actually do not have anyone's cloud certifications anymore. I had like CCP, but yeah, I'm so far into the work now. It kind of doesn't help me to get the certification. It hasn't been a requirement. No one has questioned me in that way. But I would say, like, if you're interested in maybe Terraform cert, I use Code Cloud, which is a platform for learning. It has 2 Ks instead of like the Cs. Yeah, but I can't say I use my Terraform cert either. So, I mean, there's options. My advice with certifications is learn the material. You don't have to always sit for the test. I don't have a Net Plus. I know the basics of networking. That's fine for work. Don't feel pressured to spend a whole bunch of money. It's so expensive to get a certification. And like, I look at the prices, I cry for you, I cry for myself. Like, just don't feel that pressure to drop, $300+ if you don't have to.
Fantastic. The difference between learning something and actually sitting for test. Love the way you made the distinction. Dottie, anything you would like to add?
If you're already at an employer, see if they will pay for your certifications. That's one way that I've done that which is awesome. Because yeah, it can get very expensive very quickly. Yeah, free learning. I would highly recommend searching the internet or excuse me, those resources I mentioned earlier, the Udemy, the LinkedIn Learning. Actually, AWS actually has free courses, so you could just get some of that knowledge, like Kira was saying, and then go with it and try and figure it out on your own, maybe a little bit more. I agree. I totally agree.
Aisha, your thought on the certifications, formal or informal?
Right. So I have a perspective on this. Certifications sometimes increase your visibility for potential recruiters because they are stamped that, okay, you are skilled in this particular area. So I would say that if you are going for certifications, go for something that is very specific to your job function instead of doing very generic ones. Because generic ones do not have as much weightage as, for example, if you go for a SysOps certified or a DevOps certified, as compared to, a solutions architect in AWS, that would hold, SysOps or DevOps would hold more weightage. And I completely agree with Kara in the sense that you have to learn the material, and it's not always important to sit for the test if you cannot afford it. If your company can, well and good. But in addition to learning material or doing 2 courses, I highly recommend going through practice tests. because they have actual scenarios which you can test your knowledge on and learn more from the practice test than, for example, from some courses. For me personally, certifications have always been a way to stamp out any imposter syndrome that I have. So every couple of years, if I feel like I'm lagging behind with certifications as a way of learning more, and then if I can sit for the exam, I can have a stamp on my resume that okay, I did something that some external party has vetted, so I'm probably not that bad. So that's how I've used certifications in the past, but they're absolutely not a mandatory requirement for progressing your career. Use them to whatever extent you can, and it's not always necessary to sit for the test.
Great. And for our audience members, if you are scrambling to take notes, please know that this session is recorded and it will be posted on the ACM YouTube channel in about a week or so. And as I continue my discussion with my panelists, request for my attendees, I'm sharing a link in the chat to a very brief feedback form. It wouldn't take more than 2 minutes of your time, but that will really help me understand that if this session was useful for you, if you were able to learn anything, and also what type of topics or career options would you like to have these sessions on future. So please, please, please do take those 2 minutes and fill out that form. Back to my panelists. Let's say someone is listening to this discussion either right now or later on YouTube, and they are really interested in this career. What could be the next step that they should do or look towards?
So if I can take this first, there's a very, very comprehensive roadmap shared on, I think it's called roadmaps.sh for DevOps, which basically helps you get a grip on the breadth of things that you are supposed to learn. So you have a nice checklist to go through. And I also really recommend courses from Tech World by Nana. She has very nice courses for someone who is looking to switch into DevOps, even if they don't come from a tech background. I think those are really comprehensive, and they could really help you bootstrap your career.
Fantastic. Kiara?
I don't know. I kind of I'm a person that makes up my mind and then just goes for it. So if I have to say from my experience of switching from software development, find people who are so this is gonna sound rude, but they're old and have been in SRE. Because honestly, that's where I got most of my advice. I found this guy who works at Google who just started sending me links on links of things. And he was just this is kind of an overload, but figure out what you want to do. Let me know. We can link to some more stuff as needed. And me being interested in researching, I just took a lot of those basic ones and then just started going down a rabbit hole of okay, I can learn this. This is really simple. I can get this down in 3 to 6 months. I'm gonna keep it going. But if you talk to people who have that old school system admin, SRE background, they'll tell you way more than I ever could because this is such a new title field. But it has a lot of those old school setups and structures. Sometimes you'll talk to people who are I don't know what DevOps is, but I know what SRE is. So they have so much knowledge and they're probably in DevOps, or they'll laugh and say they're retired. They're not retired. So just try to ask them questions. Also, I would make a blog. I'm really big on that. I have my own blog, but track your progress. That's the easiest way. You get a new certification, write about how you studied for it, write about the topics that really interested you. Repost that on LinkedIn, really try to attach to your name the things that you're learning in regards to this space. So when it's time for, oh, let me get a job, they go look you up. You got all these links now. You have your own secondary resume.
That's a fantastic advice, to create your profile one blog post at a time. Dottie, any final thoughts?
I will be the old person that you can all contact. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards if they have any other questions or anything, if they want some one-on-one time. And yeah, I can hook you up with resources and stuff. I do come from the kind of the old school sysadmin background that we were talking about. SRE does overlap quite a bit with DevOps. And so if you can find an old DevOps SRE person, I'm sure they would be more than happy to help. I look up to my peers as my helpers, and they're always super helpful. That's one of the best things about working in this kind of a career is I work with super smart people, and they are more than happy to help. And I am also contributing as well. So they ask me questions as well. And it's like, I cannot believe I'm even in the same room with these people. Yeah, definitely reach out if you have any questions. Happy to help.
Thank you so much. And that actually ties well to the last question I wanted to take. So someone asked that, can we connect with the panelists? Please do. On their registration page that you signed up for, all our LinkedIn addresses are there. So feel free to send us a message to connect. And if you also mention in the message that you were part of the panelists, so that will give us more perspective on who is reaching out to us. But please do feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you so much, panelists, Aisha, Kiara, Dottie, for being here and sharing your wisdom with the audience members. I know I learned a lot in this conversation, and I'm sure others have it as well. And it's a session that will keep on giving. As I said, it will be posted on YouTube, and it will be available for anyone to learn from. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you so much, attendees. And please do fill out that feedback form. Let me know what type of topics or career tracks you would like to cover. And we will be back in 6 to 8 weeks with another career paths and having a panel discussion on that. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.